As you all may have heard, Sony has not been doing well as far as anything related to Spider-Man, Marvel, the release of their movies. Not great, just miss after miss after miss. And despite Venom kind of being a fluke where that actually did well, yeah, it's not left a lot of hope for any of us waiting for the next movies to come out from Sony based on Spider-Man characters that don't have Spider-Man in it. Anyway, with the most recent release of Kraven the Hunter, I've got a few thoughts that you all may hurt me for in the comments, because I actually didn't think it was that bad. But before we get into that, make sure to click the like button, hit subscribe, and hit the bell for more notifications on whatever video I have coming up next. And with all that said, let's get into Kraven the Hunter. Despite the reviews and critiques on this movie, I mean, Rotten Tomatoes really didn't give it a great score, 15%. I actually did see quite a bit of good reviews, either 4 or 5-star reviews. And I know that may seem a bit shocking with another Sony released movie with Kraven the Hunter. But with all that said, compared to the others that we did receive, I can't be too mad at this one. It kept me engaged. I was, I wouldn't say excited, but it kept me engaged. The action sequences were great, and I'll get into the things I liked about it as well as the dislikes. There are some dislikes for sure. So as Kraven the Hunter, we have, as you know, Aaron Taylor Johnson starring the role of Kraven, and we also have Russell Crowe, which I thought was a really good get for Sony to produce this movie, especially with the movies that they've released. Getting Russell Crowe, one of the most well-known actors that we have in Hollywood right now, to portray the role of Kraven's father, he did really well. I mean, between him and Aaron Taylor Johnson, I think they stole the show, obviously for obvious reasons, Aaron Taylor Johnson. But Russell Crowe, with his acting, with his menacing demeanor that he carried throughout the movies and throughout different scenes in the movie, I thought he did a good role, or did a good job as the role of Kraven's father. With the other characters that we saw portrayed, like Calypso, which I thought she did a good job for what we were given in this movie, and could have been better as far as what I know, and I know very little about Calypso from the comics. Kraven's brother, Dimitri, was really cool seeing how, spoilers before we get into any spoilers, because this is going to be a full review, but Dimitri, the brother of Kraven, he becomes Chameleon, which is Spider-Man's very, very first supervillain, if you want to consider Chameleon a supervillain, but very first criminal that he faced, other than the one that killed Uncle Ben, obviously. But yeah, so I thought he was portrayed pretty well, with him being set up for the next Kraven movie, which we will no longer be getting, because none of those movies are showing up ever again on the screen. Apparently Sony is done with that. And for good reason. Sony finally learned the lesson that these characters, without their vital heartbeat, don't breathe. They're just dead in the water, and they don't bring the reviews and results that I'm sure that they're looking for. I don't know why it took them this long to figure that out. Again, listen to the fans. They usually know what they're talking about, because they're paying you to make these movies so that they go to watch them. If you don't give them what they want, you're not gonna get paid. So common sense, but whatever, that's whatever, here nor there. Yeah, now with Kraven, as far as what I was expecting, when I first saw the trailer, already with under the guise of, this is another Sony Marvel thing, oh boy, let's embrace yourselves, because it may not be good, it probably won't be. And then I heard Aaron Taylor Johnson and his voice. I mean, at first I heard Russell Crowe's voice. I'm like, oh, a good voice, good Kraven voice, right? But it's Russell Crowe, not Aaron Taylor Johnson, the guy who's actually playing the guy. And when he started speaking, I'm like, all right, he does the Russian, not the voice, but the Russian accent. No, not the accent. He speaks Russian. That's what I'm trying to say. Wow. Woof. But when Aaron Taylor Johnson started speaking Russian, I'm like, okay, so he can clearly speak Russian with you hear it. It's like, okay, he speaks pretty good Russian from what he was given. And then he speaks American for the whole movie. When have you ever heard Kraven the Hunter from Spider-Man comics ever speak, well, I mean, if you've ever seen him in like an animated series or whatever, whenever you ever heard him with an American accent? Whenever I see Kraven in the comics, whenever I play play a video game with Kraven in it, he's always portrayed with the Russian accent. And yet, hi, I'm Kraven. That doesn't mesh well to my ears when I heard that at first, when I first saw it. But yeah, that was one of the first things I'm like, oh, come on, you had one job. But yeah, the action sequences looked brutal. They looked violent. I'm like, okay, that's Kraven. He's pretty gruesome. Bet the guy's nose off in the trailer. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is insane. So I'm like, okay, what's the premise and all the questions that you come up with when you see a trailer? So I'm like, okay, we'll just wait and see. And wait and see, we sure did. We had to wait like, another year, maybe some change for this movie to finally come out, because it was pushed back so many times. due to, I think, rewrites or just things not right with the script, or I don't even know the history as far as why it was pushed back so many times. But we had to wait. I think it was supposed to come out last year, October. It's 2023, October, I think is when it was initially supposed to come out. And here we are in December, finally getting this movie. Crazy, in 2024. But yeah, so with that already putting a bad taste in people's mouths about this movie, and already the vibe people have been getting from Sony, it's like, okay, well, here comes another bomber for Sony, for Marvel. Like, why did they even do this? And yeah, of course, all of that. But as far as Kraven the Hunter from the comics, he is the best hunter out there. The best hunter exists. And he's always about hunting the biggest game, the next biggest trophy. So whether it's a giant lion or a crazed rhino or whatever it is, he's taking it down time after time again with no difficulty. Easy. It's easy work for Kraven. The guy's jacked, the guy's strong. On top of that, Calypso, there was a certain point where they met, Kraven and Calypso, and she gave him like different kinds of potions and elixirs that really boosted his strength and reflexes and instincts. And he finally comes across Spider-Man. He hears about him. I think it's like in the Serengeti, and then he hears news about this web slinger in New York City. He's like, huh, well, finally a challenge, finally a challenge that could actually put me to the test, because I've beat everything here. It's time to actually travel somewhere else in a different realm, a different environment, where this mysterious, mythical sounding Spider-Man exists. I'm gonna try to take him down. And that's where that connection is established. And so time and time again, he tries to capture Spider-Man, finally capture him for his own, say that I finally beat him, and then that eventually, over years of them going face to face with each other, leads into Kraven the Last Hunt, which if you're a huge comic book fan, you'll know what that story is, and that would have been a great usage for Kraven. If we had an established Kraven initially, like let's say in some planet, some other universe where this movie actually did well, and we had an established character of Kraven, that would have been an awesome story to emphasize and engage in and create and put out there, produce. That'd be such a cool, because that's a dark story. And I recently read it all the way through, and it's very good. So yeah, that would have been great, but nope, not gonna have it with this Kraven, because we're done, apparently. So with this movie, and I'll kind of seamlessly get into my likes and dislikes here, but real quick, yeah, no Spider-Man in this movie, no connection whatsoever, other than the one scene where he gets hit with chemicals or he gets hit with toxins or whatever, and he starts hallucinating, and a bunch of different spiders start falling down, which actually kind of neatly ties into how his mother was crazy. She was screaming the word spiders, like she saw spiders in her hallucinations, so that kind of was an interesting way to tie in how insane his mother actually became. And then also tying in the fact that it may, down the road, if we were to have these movies done, it could create that aversion to spiders, or that, not fear, but distaste for spiders. So that could have been some connection that they could have made as to why he would go after Spider-Man if they were to go that route, but they didn't. Kudos to them in the smallest sense that they actually threw that in there to where they could have established some connection later on, even though it'll never happen. The lack of Spider-Man and the fact that we had a Kraven movie, a superhero or a Spider-Man villain without Spider-Man didn't bother me as much as it did with Madam Web and Morbius, and especially Venom. As far as my likes are concerned, I did enjoy the action sequences. The action sequences were probably the highlight of the film. They were brutal, they were intense, they were high octane, and a lot was happening, especially, one of my favorite scenes, I think, in the movie regarding action was when he's chasing the car after his brother gets kidnapped. He's going running barefoot through the streets, climbing down walls, hopping down and getting on top of the car, trying to punch the thing open, throwing a javelin through a helicopter. There's so much happening. And I thought, like, wow, like that's how Kraven I imagine would move. So they did a good job on that. I'll give him that. And even when, there are multiple other occasions where there's action taking place, when he goes to the place where his brother's being kept, where he stops these poachers from taking the horns of these wildebeest, I believe, and he tears them up. That's where he tore the guys and bit the guy's nose off. But yeah, so very brutal, gruesome scenes, and even the very first scene where he escapes out of prison, that was pretty cool just to give a taste as far as how strong this guy is, and yet asking the question, okay, how did he get this strong? What happened to him to make him this way? So I thought the action sequences were really well done. Now, as far as story, it makes sense. There are not a whole lot of holes that didn't get plugged prior to the movie going out, and it doesn't make you go like, well, that's stupid, all the time throughout the movie. I didn't see it wasn't convoluted to the point where it was just a mess, like Madam Web. That was a freaking mess. I was bored, Nothing made sense. I woke up and I was like, where are we? What's happening? I don't know. I'm lost. My wife, yep, she's lost too. She's actually staying awake watching this thing. I'm dead asleep. But that was a mess. Morbius, that was an unfinished movie. I mean, sure, Madam Web and Morbius probably both unfinished. Those were a mess. So just a contrast from what we got with those. And I'm not going to throw Venom in that. I almost want to. But Venom, to some degree, still made sense. They just didn't take the character as seriously as I would have preferred. Yeah, those I won't throw into the category of a mess as far as Madam Web and Morbius. With Kraven, it didn't seem that way. Sure, I had questions and still have questions as far as why things took place, why things happened. And I didn't get a whole lot of backstory or context as to why, like, for example, his list, which we'll touch on that. But I didn't feel lost. Like, the story was it was linear enough to the point where I could understand what was going on. I understand the premise. Okay, he's a hunter. He's basically hunting bad people. So he's an anti-hero. And somehow these people end up on his list, and there's only one way off the list once you're on it. So I'm like, okay, that's enough, I guess, to hold me, but I still have questions. Like, what are the conditions for people being put on this list? Why these specific people? Are they only in a certain region? I mean, maybe I'm thinking too much about it. But it almost reminds me of, weirdly enough, this is weird, but reminds me of Dexter, where he has a code. He has a reason as to why he kills certain people. He doesn't just kill anybody. I mean, he's a serial killer. He's kind of crazy in the head, but he doesn't just kill anybody. There's a reason as to why, and there's certain conditions that need to be met for those to be his next victim. With Kraven, they're just bad people. But I don't know. If he deems them worthy of entering his list, then that's what's going to happen. So whatever. The other thing I liked about it is that they finally took this character seriously. Unlike Morbius, Madam Web, Venom, they didn't take the character seriously as far as where they come from in the comics, how we associate with these characters already. But yeah, with Kraven, they took this character seriously. Like, he was imposing. Despite him not having the accent and that kind of doing some things for me. Okay, look, here's what I'll say before I get into the dislikes here. The filter that I watched this movie through, if I were to remove the connection to Spider-Man, and if I were to see this as its own movie, far removed from Marvel, Spider-Man, what have you, like, if any other title was slapped onto this movie and you just saw the trailer and there was no real connection, obvious connection to Spider-Man or Kraven the Hunter, I was able to enjoy it through that lens. The fact that it's a Sony production and it's supposed to be related to Spider-Man and have a slight connection to him, very, very, very slight connection. Despite that, and despite this being also the last iteration of this movie or these projects, I was able to, I don't know how, honestly, but I was able to remove myself from that and just like say, hey, look, here's an action film with this character portraying these roles. Let's see how it goes. And it kept my interest throughout. So I'll say that. So it allowed me to enjoy the movie knowing that this was not the Kraven that we know, the Kraven that we're familiar with, and I accepted that. And with that put aside, I was able to enjoy the movie as much as I could with what we got. And it was actually a pretty good movie. I'm gonna get flayed in the comments, but that's fine. That's fine. That's what we're here for. It's all about opinions, right? We're all entitled to one. They're all like assholes. Anyway, with that said, let's get into the dislikes. Now, what I didn't like, and the big elephant in the room, obviously the accent. That was the first thing that I was like, you had one job, and I mentioned this earlier. So yeah, now that we're here, he can do the accent. Aaron Taylor Johnson can do the accent. I mean, I'm not sure if it was a Russian accent, but remember Avengers 2, Age of Ultron? Pietro? They had that accent? What, you did not see that coming? Like, I'm not going to pretend like I know how to do it, but, like, he can clearly do an accent close enough to the Russian accent. Maybe I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they tried it out. Maybe they tried out, hey, Aaron Taylor Johnson, hear the lines, and maybe he tried out doing the Russian accent, and the longer they heard it, they're like, it's not gonna work. It doesn't work with these scenes, or it doesn't feel right here, maybe. So I'm just really trying to rationalize why they didn't use this guy's voice. But again, he portrayed this character Quicksilver in Avengers Age of Ultron, the whole movie. He had the accent, and it was fine. So that didn't make sense right off the bat. So it's like, you could do it, but they chose not to, for whatever reason. I'm sure there was one, maybe, who knows. Kraven in the game, that's who I imagine, that's who I hear, that's who I see in comics, movies, television shows, whatever. That's Kraven. So when I heard that, and the fact that he could do an accent but didn't, I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Small gripe, but it's just like, that's like the core of him, and they left it out. Second thing, if you're gonna make a Kraven movie, make it a Kraven movie. Don't make it a movie that's similar to the character of Kraven and just slap whatever you want into it and then put Kraven as the title. Now, as far as Kraven's abilities, that kind of ends up in both aspects of my likes and dislikes list. Were they cool? Yeah. Were they explained? Not really, but that's part of the mystery. That's part of the mysticism behind what happened to him after he imbibed the potions that he was given. As far as like there's some sort of mystic voodoo situation going on with how he gets connected to the earth. Some unnatural things may take place based on who the potion is given to. But the fact that he was able to, along with the lion's blood that dripped into his wound and the potions that he imbibed given by Calypso, that may have had instilled the whole connection between wildlife and what the potion was actually supposed to do. So the combination between the two is probably what gave him his abilities. And even before he got attacked, or before his father shot the lion, it's almost as if he had a connection with animals already, prior to getting the potion, prior to anything. Because before, Kraven had the gun when he was young, he had the gun up to the lion, and they were just having a stare-off. He was lowering the weapon, nothing was about to happen, then all of a sudden his father shoots the lion, that's what gets him to attack. So there was something already there, or was there. I mean, I'm not sure if that was their intent or their implication, but maybe Kraven already had some underlying or subconscious understanding of, wildlife, of nature. So, and the potions probably was what brought it out. Again, all questions and answers that you had to create for yourself because it was not explained. The abilities and what it made him do, made him able to do, his understanding with the animals, the way he moved, his increased strength, all of that is based, other than the fact that he's able to relate to animals in that way in the movie. He doesn't do that in the comics, but he is given these elixirs and potions to increase his strength. That makes him that much more of a versatile hunter. But as far as what the aspect of it I didn't like is the fact that they almost kind of shoehorned it in to where it's, all right, the blood mixed with the potion is what gave him the abilities of, it kind of sounds dumb. I mean, sure, a spider bites a guy and he becomes Spider-Man. So yeah, sure, when you say it out loud, anything can sound dumb. At some point I just had to get to the point where I just let it happen. This is what's happening, this is what they're doing, this is what they're giving us, so take it as is. But yeah, it was a little weird for me, a little funky about how he got his abilities, but when he got his abilities and he was using them, I was like, okay, this is awesome. With Morbius being the movie, the trash movie it was, Madam Web being like 10 times worse than that, it's a shame. It's a shame. There was so much potential for these characters, and because I think the reason that they pushed these films out, Sony, is because in order to keep the contract for Spider-Man, they need to have a project released I think every year in order for them to maintain the rights to Spider-Man. Otherwise, if they can't come up with a movie related to Spider-Man or whatever it is, whatever the deal was, they lose the rights and they go straight to Marvel, Kevin Feige, MCU, and MCU can do whatever they want with it, which is what we all want. If you're not going to do it right, give it to somebody else who can do it right. Or listen to the fans for a change. I don't know. I can't say that enough. But yeah, so I think that's the reason that they just farted out these movies without any regard for how well it did or if it was finished or not. Push it out because we need our boy, we need our moneymaker Spider-Man, because he's our golden egg. He's our golden goose that lays the golden eggs. Or is it the golden goose or is it the goose that lays the golden eggs? Whatever, look that up and I'll figure it out. So that would make the most sense to me as far as why these movies didn't do very well at all, or it didn't seem like there was a whole lot of effort or work put into them, where they could have been great, they could have been utilized for great stories in the Spider-Man comics if they just put the freaking character Spider-Man in it. Those movies aside, Venom being the weird outlier that did fairly well, but even the last movie didn't do the best. Still, Kraven, I had a good time. Out of the other ones that I've watched where I just kind of walked out numb and unfeeling, I don't even know what I watched, but it was a movie. Honestly, I couldn't really call it a movie. Those were just pieces of trash. Kraven, I actually had a good time. I enjoyed myself. The story was linear enough for me to follow. And the action sequences were great, kept me engaged, high-octane action. There was a reason for Kraven to act a certain way he does. Oh my gosh, Rhino, I forgot to mention Rhino. So yeah, Rhino, part of his character was that he had a condition where he felt weak, and he started feeling weak, he wanted to feel strong. So he met Dr. Miles Warren, which I thought was a really cool nod, which makes sense. But the Jackal in Marvel Comics for Spider-Man. The Jackal was also the one responsible for the Clone Saga, which apparently back in the day when that was released did terrible. People hated the Clone Saga. But that's where you got Ben Reilly and Kane, Scarlet Spider. And also, I think there was a clone of Gwen Stacy where she also all of a sudden came back and she's like, oh, I thought you died. But he actually made a clone of Gwen Stacy. So that's the guy. And so he's the guy who's been kind of the power monger for giving these people different abilities. Like he gave Rhino his abilities for his condition to feel stronger, but he had a caveat where it was excruciating pain for him to embrace that side of him. That fight scene was pretty cool, actually. I wasn't really too mad about that. Sure, the graphics, CGI, let's talk about that for like a split second. Yeah, not the best. Like that wolf in the very first scene in that snowstorm. Oh my god, oh my gosh. And I'm usually not a big stickler for CGI or bad graphics. I can usually just accept it like, yeah, none of this is real. It's all computer generated anyway, but make it as real as you can. Like, at least try. And so at some certain points, it was just like, oh my gosh, they didn't try. They didn't try hard enough. So yeah, all of that to say, with all the movies that Sony has put out, that we've sat through and suffered through, Kraven was the one, I think, for me, and minus a few of the Venom movies. I feel like I want to hate those movies because they didn't portray Venom the way he should have been portrayed. With freaking Spider-Man. Like, if you pan around the room, freaking, he's everywhere, and he wasn't anywhere in these movies. It didn't make sense. So that's why, like, yeah, the movies did good. They were received very well. But for me, he could have been so much more. He could have been so much more. But they squandered it. But with that said, Kraven being the one that came out, I won't say unscathed, but with very minimal scratches compared to everybody else, all the other movies, I thought it did much better. Perfect movie? Absolutely not. The best movie in the world? No, hell no. But for me as a viewer, as a fan of Marvel, superhero movies, what have you, I enjoyed myself. Sony, I enjoyed a movie you put out. Can you imagine that? I actually enjoyed Kraven the Hunter. So with that said, what did you guys think? Did you guys hate it? Did you guys absolutely hate it? Or maybe a few of you actually ended up loving the movie and enjoying it. Let me know down in the comments below. Thanks again for joining me for today's video. I am Spidey Trainer. On your way out, remember to thwip the like button, hit subscribe, and hit the bell for more notifications of whatever video I have coming up next. And until next time, stay amazing.